After months of fierce and bloody fighting, Russian forces may be on the verge of capturing the eastern city of Bakhmut. Even as Russian fighters surround the city, Ukrainian commanders are not withdrawing and instead calling on President Zelensky to send in reinforcements.
CNN's Alex Marquardt is in eastern Ukraine. Mercenary fighters from the Wagner Group were seen planting their flag in the eastern part of the city. Tell us about that.
Well, hi there, Victor and Bianna. Well, in the past few days, Russian forces have made some progress at encircling Bakhmut. Not major, but they have been pressing forward to the north and to the south around the city, and then pressing into the city from the east. We did see that new video from the Wagner Group. Remember, Wagner has been really leading the charge when it comes to Russian forces around Bakhmut. They removed a Ukrainian flag from a monument. They planted their own flag, not the Russian flag, but the Wagner flag. And raised their guns in the air. Meanwhile, we did hear from President Zelensky's office tonight saying that they continue to defend their positions, defend the city, and they talked about reinforcing their positions. They didn't talk about surrender. But we have spent a lot of time in that area over the past few days. We spent a lot of time on the main supply route between the neighboring town of Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut. There's a lot of military traffic on that road. I can tell you that it is getting very difficult to move in and out of Bakhmut. It is getting attacked by Russian forces. They blew up a bridge on that main supply route just a couple of days ago. We were told by local officials today that military engineers have erected a temporary bridge. So troops are able to move forward and back. People are able to come out and go in, but it is getting much more difficult. And Victor and Bianna, you're starting to hear this line, despite the fact that no withdrawal has been announced, that even if Ukraine were to withdraw, that this would not actually be a strategic victory for Russia, that they will have lost so many men, they would have taken over this city that doesn't actually have any strategic value, that Ukraine was able to degrade Russian forces and buy time for a planned counteroffensive, that at the end of the day, according to U.S. and Ukrainian officials, it would not be that strategic a victory for Russia, but it really would be a loss for Ukraine. They also have lost a lot of men in this fight. They've lost professional soldiers. While on the Russian side, so many of the people who've been killed have been convicts in the mercenary group. And so at the end of the day, you know, this would be a symbolic victory for Russia, but it really is up for debate how strategic it would be. One last thing, I did speak with the deputy mayor of Bakhmut today, who said there are still some 4,000 to 5,000 people who are still in the city. They're trying to get as many out as possible, around 5 to 10 per day, if they're lucky. The people in there, he says, they simply don't want to leave because they say they don't know where they would go, that they don't have any money. They're scared. They're scared to go out on that road. And he said that his overwhelming feeling when thinking about his city right now is fear and sadness. Victor, Bianna?
This is a city that was once home to tens of thousands of Ukrainians. Alex Marquardt, thank you. Well, let's bring in CNN's Oren Liebermann, who is at the Pentagon. Oren, the defense secretary spoke out about the situation in Bakhmut today. What is he saying?
This really echoes the point that Alex was making there about the strategic value or lack thereof when it comes to the city of Bakhmut. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who's now traveling in the Middle East, said this wouldn't be some strategic victory for Russia simply because there isn't that much strategic value to Bakhmut. Just given its location, it doesn't control the surrounding area or have a lookout that gives you a strategic advantage. And still, Russia is determined to keep throwing as many lives as it needs to at this to take Bakhmut. But again, Austin's saying this wouldn't be a victory. Listen to what he had to say here.
I would not view that as an operational or a strategic setback. I think it's more of a symbolic value than it is strategic and operational value. What I do see on a daily basis is the Russians continuing to pour in a lot of ill-trained and ill-equipped troops, and those troops are very quickly meeting their demise.
It is worth pointing out that even if the city itself doesn't have strategic value, it is an important decision where you decide, where Ukraine, that is, decides to fight Russian forces. Right now, Ukraine is making that decision to fight in the city of Bakhmut, and that is an important strategic decision. Ukraine realizing if they don't fight them on the line in Bakhmut and they decide at some point to withdraw and to move back towards the west, that'll simply be the new line at which they fight the Russians. And that perhaps another reason that they've decided to hold or at least fight for the city of Bakhmut as long as possible possible as both sides suffer very high losses here, Bianna and Victor.
This is as we're anticipating an offensive from the Ukrainians sometime this spring as well. Oren Liebermann, thank you. General Wesley Clark is a CNN military analyst and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. General, good to see you. So I'm interested to get your take because we heard from the Defense Secretary today saying that in his view, a retreat from Bakhmut would not be an operational or strategic setback for the Ukrainians. And yet on the same day, we're hearing that Ukrainian military officials are advising President Zelensky to continue to send in reinforcements to fight for this city. Is that a mistake on their part at this point?
Well, it's really hard to second guess this, Bianna, because we're not there. We don't see the terrain. We don't see the ground. Now, if you look at Bakhmut and you look west, it's several miles to the next really good defensible terrain location. And if they get there, if they fall back, they're going to have to hold there. Falling back, a withdrawal under pressure is one of the most difficult military operations. You suffer the risk of a catastrophic collapse and big losses when you do this. So it does make some sense, and I can understand the logic of the Ukrainians in wanting to hold where they are as long as they can. They are inflicting heavy casualties on the Russians. What we don't see, Bianna, is we don't see what's behind the initial Russian assault. We don't see the forces in depth arrayed back there. We also don't know how the Ukrainian command is building up its own forces for the counteroffensive and how much it can whittle away that force if necessary to reinforce in Bakhmut. So there's a lot of intangibles here and things that we just don't have the information on. I do agree with Secretary Austin. It's probably not a great, from our perspective, operational or tactical loss, but it is a psychological blow and a psychological lift for Moscow. And at some point, these Russian troops have to be defeated. They have to be held. They have to be pushed back. And so from the Ukrainian military perspective, it's a very understandable position to hold that line as long as it possibly can.
I'm glad you brought up that planned spring counteroffensive that everyone's anticipating from the Ukrainians, because I'm wondering, listen, from a cost-benefit perspective, one could argue that the past few months really did benefit Ukraine to continue fighting in Bakhmut because you lost a lot of Russian men, a lot of Russian troops, and ammunition as well that they invested in their battle for that city. But at some point, it does turn, and you see the reflection upon Ukrainians who are also losing their troops there at an enormous rate and their ammunition. Do you think the longer they maintain this fight for Bakhmut, do you think it could impact whatever counteroffensive they're planning?
Well, it certainly could, but they have to hold in the east. They do not want to surrender Donbass. If they do, they're just going to have to fight further west. So they've got prepared defensive positions here. They've got stockpiles. They know the routes. This is an advantageous way to hold for as long as they can. Look, Bianna, there's no doubt that the Russians have superiority of artillery. Secretary Austin has acknowledged that. The thing is, they have more artillery tubes and they're firing more ammunition on a daily basis than the Ukrainians. We just got to get them more help. And until that time, they're going to have a hard time holding, and the Ukrainians are taking casualties. But this is war, and it's their country, and they want to hold it.
It is proving to be very difficult to procure the amount of ammunition that Ukraine is requiring at this point. Here's how one military expert described Russia's at all costs battle for Bakhmut, assuming that Ukrainians at some point do retreat. Here's what he wrote. The reality is that if the Russians do capture Bakhmut, they are seizing rubble. It is a town with minimal strategic importance, with almost no remaining infrastructure to support an occupying force. That the Russians have invested so much in its capture speaks volumes about their poor strategy in this war. Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm a little cautious about that assessment, Bianna, because it is written from the Western perspective. If you had 500,000 people and you lost 30,000 people, 40,000 people in a month, and you took Bakhmut, you might say that's insignificant if you were a Russian commander. Now, if you're an American commander or a Ukrainian commander and you're losing 30,000 troops over that piece of ground, that's really significant. But if you're a Russian commander and they're pushing those troops forward and say, use them up, use them up, use them up, and you get a breakthrough in Bakhmut or you significantly degrade the Ukrainians, on balance, from the Russian perspective, it might be worth it. So I think we have to be a little cautious about critiquing Russian tactics from our perspective.
Yeah, from Russia's perspective, these troops are expendable. There's talk about another conscription perhaps coming this summer. General Wesley Clark, thank you so much. Always great to have you on and your analysis.